Hey viewers and viewers, my name is General Red Strategist and welcome back to Syria Being Hunted, something like episode 751 now, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? I think. I should have checked my upload schedule before I started recording and all that. Well, we're here, nonetheless, for another podcast-style episode, and partly I'm doing this because my queue is getting a bit low, so I need to record more content. Also, partly doing it though just because there is a topic on my brain that I feel like I should sort of acknowledge and maybe talk about a little bit, just in terms of something that's happened on my channel recently, which is it's not like an emergency or anything serious, anything like that. It's just something that I'm sort of wondering whether I should kind of address it a little bit. And so I'm thinking, actually, you know what? I can address it first through a Syria Being Hunted podcast-style episode, since it's not something that I think at this stage is something serious. But if it turns into something that people are asking about a lot, I can always just, I don't know, potentially post an update on the community/post tab and all that. Basically, I'll date the video. It's 12th of June, ladies and gentlemen, as I'm going to record this, Thursday and all that. And you may have noticed that in this afternoon when I posted the bonus video, or a bonus video for today, I posted a 1-hour recording that I did of a game that I bought recently on Steam, and the name of the game was Shop Simulator Waifu Pillows. And I'd sort of first encountered this game when I saw it on Yogscast. I'd seen it on their video that they'd done on it there, and I thought, this game looks kind of goofy and silly, and it actually probably would be sort of weirdly hilarious. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to buy it myself on Steam, do an episode of my own on it and all that. So I uploaded, published it, it's fine. But it has since come to my attention, thanks to a comment left on that video, that apparently that game has AI-generated content in it, which, I'll be honest with you, I was unaware of, and to be quite honest, I am sort of actually annoyed at myself for not picking up on that sooner, because, I mean, the only excuse I can go with is kind of twofold, really, ladies and gentlemen. For a start, I didn't notice the disclaimer on the Steam store page where it says this game uses AI-generated textures and music, because that disclaimer is actually quite low down the Steam store page, and I think you have to click the read more icon in order to even get it to come up. So it's a little bit sneaky in that regard. And you'd probably think, okay, but did you not click read more to begin with when you bought the game, Red? And honestly, no, I didn't. And I think that's probably just my bad. Because the thing is, I actually bought and played that game the same day. I bought it after I just got back from work, a long day at work, and I was probably kind of a bit tired, therefore not entirely concentrating, not entirely focused. Hence why I missed it. And you might then think, but surely you must have noticed when you were playing it that it had AI content. And to be honest, no, I don't think I did. I mean, looking back on it now, I think I can see probably what I missed. But at the time, I didn't, and that's, again, probably just the fact that I wasn't really focused. I was a bit tired and therefore not 100% in, focusing on what I was doing. But also because I have a feeling the AI-generated textures in that game are probably on the body pillow designs themselves in it, and I didn't really look closely enough at those. Because the thing about AI-generated imagery is that, sometimes from a distance it can look legit. It's usually when you then get up close and look at it that you start to realise that there's stuff wrong with it. Because the thing is, I am not at all unfamiliar with some of the things that you look for when you're looking at an image to see if it's potentially AI generated. For example, AI sometimes has problems generating images of human forms. Sometimes, for example, it'll get slight details incorrect, like fingers, digits and extremities. It'll sort of get the rough shape, but it won't quite get the details correct. So, for example, like the perspective of certain parts of the human body might not be correct, or it may have strange instances where fingers and things look like they're blending together when you look closely at them, stuff like that. But to be honest, like I say, those are the kind of things that are very small, and if you're looking at the image from a distance, you might not pick up on immediately, not until you sort of stop and actually look at it longer and more closely. And yeah, I didn't really do that all that often in that video, hence why I think it just escaped my attention. So yeah, people were sort of saying in the comments that, Red, this has AI generated stuff in it, should you really be playing that? And I was sort of thinking, you know what? Yeah, I'm not entirely sure what to make of the fact that it's got AI generated stuff in it. I'm not sure I really kind of not disapprove of it, but I just feel a bit like I don't know if I want to be playing games like that. And I'm not saying that the dev of this game necessarily has kind of done anything wrong necessarily. I mean, if they're using an AI generating model where it's trained on imagery that technically artists have consented to have their imagery used in that way, then okay, maybe that's not too bad. But the problem is, there's nothing in the disclaimer on the Steam store page to clarify that, and even if there was, there's no way really for ourselves as players to verify that that's the truth. So for all we know, those AI generated images may well have been generated using an AI that is trained on lots of images that for all we know, the artists who created those images may not have consented to their works being used in that way, which is obviously where AI, one of the ways in which generative AI sort of runs into potential ethical problems. I mean, that's not obviously even mentioning the fact that there are other potential criticisms of AI tools as well. I mean, obviously there's like environmental concerns about generative AI in terms of the amount of energy they use when you're having a conversation with them, or when you're like training them, training large language models, that kind of thing. So yeah, basically, it's funny. It's just kind of frustrating for me because I kind of am cursing myself, like I say, for not seeing that sooner. Like I say, I think I was just tired after a long day at work, and just therefore wasn't entirely thinking. I guess wasn't entirely concentrating. But the thing is, like, I was looking at the page on Steam for the dev who made that game, because they have a couple of other ones. Like, I think a couple of other shop simulator games. And I was looking at the Steam store pages for those ones, and there was no disclaimer on those about AI-generated imagery or anything like that. So it seems they've just suddenly started using AI-generated imagery in this latest game of theirs. So it's kind of weird. I don't know. It's strange. And yeah, like I say, it's kind of frustrating because mechanically the game itself was kind of sound, and I weirdly was kind of enjoying it and was thinking I might actually do more. I could always see myself just doing, one or two more episodes or something. But now that people have brought to my attention that it has that AI generated imagery, and now that I've got those questions in my head, I'm just not sure if I'm going to bother doing any more on it. Because that's the thing, like, I don't know. I mean, like I say, for all I know, maybe the dev has used an AI model that is using, well, is trained on imagery that artists have consented for their images to be used in that way, but we don't know, and that's the problem. And we know that obviously there's been a lot of controversy with other generative AIs about the fact that sometimes they are trained on stuff where there's just a question about whether the stuff that the creators of the AIs are using to train them, whether artists who created those things have actually been aware that their stuff's been used in that way. So I'm thinking I might not really take the risk and all that. Not that I'm getting into trouble with people, it's just a bit of a grey area, that's all, and I'm not sure I want to really be getting into all of that. So yeah, that's what I'm thinking, ladies and gentlemen. But the thing is, like, it also got me thinking actually about something else as well, because I went back to that Yogscast video where I originally saw that game, the Shop Simulator Waifu Pillows game, and I was looking through the comments on there, and I noticed a few people on there who had pointed out and said, it's AI generated, right? That there's AI generated content in this. And again, judging by some of the Yogscast responses, the answer was no, they didn't realise. Probably for similar kind of reasons as to me, in essence. But there were other comments on there that were suggesting, was that game a bit of an asset flip as well? And I don't necessarily know if you call it an asset flip, because I actually decided to sort of look into this as well, because I thought it would be an interesting topic to talk about too. Asset flips in gaming. I know people sometimes are quite negative towards them, because there's that sort of connotation of them being kind of low effort, because the person who makes the game obviously is using a bunch of pre-bought assets, that they've got from places like, say, Unity Store, Unreal Store, or whatever. And I actually found an interesting Reddit thread with people sort of discussing, what constitutes an asset flip, what threshold has to be crossed in order for a game to be very much regarded as being a mediocre or bad asset flip and all that. And it was kind of interesting because honestly that's not really something that I've ever honestly thought about myself, to put it that way, but people definitely had some interesting thoughts. Because the thing is, obviously, for various game engines out there like Unity, Unreal, there are stores, online where you can go and buy pre-made assets that people make for them. So, if you're, say, an aspiring game dev and you don't have a lot of experience in creating games, and, you don't have much experience in creating 3D models, props, that kind of thing, or artworks, then, yeah, asset stores like that can be a bit of a godsend, because there's stuff on there potentially that you can just use, and it saves you a bit of time that would otherwise have to be spent learning how to do things that perhaps you have no experience in. And that's okay, if you're, say, like an aspiring game dev who doesn't really have all the time in the world to be learning a new skill, it can be good, if you're just creating like your first game, for example, and you decide actually you could use some existing pre-made store assets. And then, hopefully once you've kind of generated a bit of income, and if you get to a position where you can start making game dev something full-time, then, you might free up a bit of time for you to go and learn some new skills in 3D modelling and stuff like that, so you can then try creating models and stuff from scratch. And that's okay. But I think where asset flipping becomes a bit of a problem, at least just in my own opinion, based on different viewpoints, different opinions that I've read online. Where I think it becomes a problem is if you're basically if in essence you construct a game around whatever pre-made assets you've bought, and as a result the assets that you're using in game feel sort of like they've all been cobbled together without kind of real rhyme or reason as to whether they actually fit together, or whether they fit with the overall themes and story and aesthetic of your game that you're trying to create. Because here's the thing, as people I think on that Reddit thread I mentioned a moment ago were saying, asset flipping works and is fine when you kind of start out with a concept of what your game's story, its themes, its visual aesthetic and all that is going to be, and then you sort of tailor what assets you're buying to those themes and that aesthetic and that story. It's when you have games where it definitely feels like a dev basically just grabbed a load of assets off a store, threw them all together, and then just sort of made things like the story as an afterthought, and as a result it feels like there's that kind of dissonance between the sort of underlying design of the game and the actual props and assets and things that it actually uses, to put it that way. So I think I sort of agree with that, but I think there's also something else to it. It's kind of I think also important when game devs actually make sure to credit the creators of assets that they've used. Because that's the thing, I'm sure there are probably lots of people out there, game dev wise, who may well have been a bit sneaky, and where they've bought pre-made assets off stores, use them in their games, but then haven't credited the people who originally created them. And I think that obviously is also where you run into problems. Or where, for example, like someone buys an asset on the store, does a little bit of modification to it, and then tries to pass that off as their own. That also is a problem, and I can understand that as an academic, because obviously, that's basically plagiarism. That's what we'd call plagiarism in the academic sphere, for instance. And so, one of the replies I saw on that Reddit thread was actually from someone who purported to be a person who makes assets to go on things like the Unity store, stuff like that. And their take on it was, absolutely feel free to use them, That at the end of the day, that's what they're there for. And when you get people who sort of sit there and go, you shouldn't just use pre-made assets, you should make your own, If you're using pre-made assets, that's a sign of bad quality. This person who basically said they were an asset developer, basically said, don't listen to those kind of voices, because that's kind of a bit gatekeepy, to put it that way. And they said, as long as you're following the terms of service laid down by the person who made the asset, that's fine. You're giving them credit where credit's due. And ultimately, as well as that, you've got to bear in mind that when someone uses pre-made assets in their game, and then obviously selling their game, they're not selling the license to the assets in it. That's not what they're doing. They're selling their game. They're selling their game that uses assets that were sold on the store on the basis of them being used in games, including games that could then be sold commercially, if you see what I mean. So, yeah, I kind of agreed with that person on that Reddit thread. So, like I say, yeah, some asset flips are bad. And I think a good example of that was a Steam game that you can find, which I think it's called Playtown, I believe, which is basically one of these sort of Poppy Playtime inspired garbage games that is made by someone just trying to cash in on the mascot horror trend. I may have mentioned it before, actually, in one of my Sir episodes. I was talking about mascot horror and all that. But if you've seen any screenshots of that game definitely has asset flip written all over it, in terms of you look at a lot of the assets that are used in game and it just looks a bit silly, and like it's all just cobbled together out of random bits and bobs that the dev had, rather than the dev first and foremost settling on kind of like a concept of really what they wanted their story to be and what they wanted the vibe of their game to be. Instead of doing that first and then tailoring the assets to that, it feels like they had a bunch of assets that they wanted to use, they threw a load of them together and just sort of made up the story on the fly, and as a result it feels jarring, like there's that kind of dissonance between the overarching kind of vibe of the game and then the actual props and stuff that's been used in it, if that makes sense. And that is an example of a bad asset flip right there. But that's not to say asset flipping is inherently bad. You can still make something interesting and original in that sense. And I sort of get into this whole shebang, this whole conversation, because like I said, there's comments I saw that said that Shop Simulator Waifu Pillows, apart from using AI generated stuff, also might have been using assets. And to be fair, I'm not criticising it for using assets at all. That's not what I'm trying to do. And in fact, as someone who has never really visited asset stores before all that much, I wouldn't know the difference. I wouldn't be able to recognise many sort of commonly used assets. There are ones I encounter, for example, in some of the horror games I occasionally play on my channel from time to time, where you clearly see certain like props and things that definitely feel like they've cropped up between different games by different devs. And so immediately you think, yeah, that's got to be a friggin' pre-bought asset or whatever. But that's not necessarily automatically a bad thing. Like I say, it depends. Does it fit with the story, the aesthetic, the vibe, the themes of your game or not? Or does it feel like just some random thing that you've cobbled together in there for the sake of it? That is the question, ladies and gentlemen. But yes, I don't know, I just thought it would be interesting to talk about that. And like I say, I felt like it was worth just acknowledging that bonus video I put out recently technically was of a game that had AI generated imagery, and so in case anyone was wondering about that, that's just me speaking to it. Like I say, it's not a serious issue. It's not an emergency or a crisis or anything like that. It's just something that I was unaware of, and people probably are just kind of interested in just hearing from me on it, maybe, potentially. So, those are my thoughts, ladies and gentlemen. Just an acknowledgement of that. If it blows up into something more serious, then I'll post a thing on the community tab and all that. Not that I'm imagining it will do. My channel's freaking tiny. There's never going to be any fucking drama here. Certainly not around that, at least. Yeah, well, ladies and gentlemen, I probably think that's going to be a good place to start wrapping up. And maybe I should just go and deposit these device pieces. Never mind, there's actually robots in the way. Fuck it, well, we saved at the jetty right there, that's fine. Okay, social media links, propagandist channel link, etc, down in the video description below, along with a link to my propagandist channel for anyone interested, and if you enjoyed, a like is of course always appreciated. But other than that, I'm going to sign off now. Goodbye everybody. I felt like I might have done, but I can't tell. Oh, no, he's here. He's here, I hear him. There he is. Oh shit, what the hell? I just got turned around. The fuck? Oh god, that's bad. I'll take that off for now. Reload. Right, he's behind me, he's behind me. We are going to need to find health replenishment items. Shit. Right. Oh, crap, that's bad. Take that off. Keep going, like this. Cut corners so he can't get to me. You behind me again? No, you are. Jesus. Take that off.